Since the beginning of the day, there have already been 67 battles on the front line. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, most of the Russian assaults are happening in the Pokrovsk direction.
Pokrovsk is basically split into two directions, to the southwest, toward the Dnipropetrovsk region, and to the northeast from Pokrovsk, which is toward Kostiantynivka. So, the enemy understands the role and importance of Kostiantynivka and is trying to attack it from three sides, from Pokrovsk, which is one of the directions we mentioned, from Chasiv Yar, and from Toretsk, where the fighting is extremely intense. The Lyman direction is also very close to this area.
In the Lyman sector, Ukrainian forces successfully repelled Russian assaults near Kharkivka in the Luhansk region, as well as near Karpivka, Lipov, Rykidub, and Torsky in the Donetsk region. The enemy also tried to advance in the area of Novy Mir, Zarazov, and Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region. In the Kupiansk direction, the occupiers are using small mobile groups on ATVs, buggies, and motorcycles as disposable resources, according to the military.
After the failure of their armored assaults, the Russians are switching to operations with small groups. The enemy's main goal is to secure positions in the tree lines. They treat their vehicles as expendable material. They just abandon the motorcycles, and we destroy them. Destroying and suppressing logistics routes is also one of our priorities. Everything located on the front line and in nearby areas is quickly detected and destroyed. For the Russians, it's almost impossible to rotate personnel with vehicles or deliver supplies. Call sign Sirius, Chief of Staff of the 4th Battalion of the 1st Presidential Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine, in an interview with Army TV.
The Russian army continues to lose expensive and rare equipment as well. In one section of the front, fighters from the 15th Artillery Reconnaissance Brigade destroyed the occupiers' Zupark radar complex. The cost of such a radar system is $25 million. The occupiers lack the manpower and equipment to operate equally actively along the entire front line, according to military experts.
That's why they act, first and foremost, based on their priorities. We see activity in the Sumy, Kursk, and Belgorod regions. It's active and very tense, and in the Kursk region, fighting continues around Tekhino. That's the situation. And Sumy region, of course, is drawing the most attention since they've formed a group there. They've moved some forces from Kursk there, about 55,000. Naturally, our commanders, both tactical and higher level, understand this, so they're organizing the appropriate efforts and taking measures to disrupt these plans.
The Ukrainian Defense Forces operation in the Kursk region is also ongoing. There, Ukrainian fighters repelled 11 Russian assaults, and soldiers from the 5th Border Detachment destroyed a warehouse with Russian Federation Army drones, 2 artillery positions, 8 shelters, and enemy infantry. Overall, the total losses of the aggressor country's army since the start of the full-scale invasion have already exceeded 991,000 people. In the past 24 hours, 1,020 Russian soldiers were eliminated, along with 7 armored vehicles, 88 artillery systems, and dozens of other pieces of Russian equipment.
Let's go.
We're joined by Denis Popovich, military analyst. Good morning, Denis.
Hello.
Good morning.
By the way, regarding losses, according to size estimates, this summer Russian military losses in the war against Ukraine will exceed 1 million people, and about 250,000 of those are irrecoverable losses. That's 5 times more than in all the wars fought by the USSR and the Russian Federation combined since World War II. How would you assess the consequences of such, let's say, staggering losses, and, in fact, how quickly can such losses be replenished in the Russian Federation, considering their current active assault operations on almost all fronts?
Losses are being replenished almost completely thanks to the tactics currently being used. This involves recruiting those who are willing to sign a contract to fight in the war against Ukraine. So, for now, this approach allows them to make up for their losses almost entirely. We can easily calculate, using data from the General Staff, how much they lose per month by multiplying the numbers. Well, we just mentioned the numbers. And the rate at which they replenished their forces was mentioned earlier, so that's about 1,200, maybe 1,000 people, somewhere in that range as of today. It's easy to see. We understand perfectly well that it's about 30 to 40,000 people per month, which allows them to fully make up for their losses. Maybe sometimes they're a little in the red, maybe sometimes a little in the black. But still, for now, their needs are generally being met, and people have already been relocated.
Tell me, please, what do you think? Every now and then the question comes up about whether Putin should or will actually go for some kind of mass mobilization. She is still, in principle, yes, not small, but still, yes, in different ways. But if we're talking about some kind of large-scale approach, what do you think, this summer, considering these supposed plans to carry out offensive operations, will it be necessary? Will the Kremlin authorities actually take such a step? Or maybe, I don't know, will it be closer to the fall? Or is this more of a prospect that's still pretty far off?
Well, of course, that's really a question for the Kremlin authorities. Only they make the decision, whether to go for mobilization or not. They've already made all the necessary legislative changes for this, so that people don't start running away like they did in the fall of 2022. In my opinion, a decision on mobilization could be made under the pressure of very serious losses, or if there's a major failure of their plan or a military defeat, just like what happened in 2022, basically. For now, it's clear they're hoping to manage with the resources they currently have. And that, I'll say again, means recruiting and, let's say, signing contracts or getting conscripts to switch to contract service. By the way, right now we're seeing some pretty interesting trends. Whereas before they were increasing the payouts, now they're actually lowering them. In Bashkortostan, for example, the payout was reduced. This week it became known that the one-time payment was cut from 1.6 million rubles to 1 million. That's the kind of symptom they're showing. But for now, I repeat, they're still managing with the resources they currently have.
Nevertheless, for some reason, the Financial Times is publishing these assumptions that the Russian Federation wants to deploy 10,000 troops in Transnistria, on the border with the Odessa region. Well, I mean, it doesn't seem like a huge number of Russian troops, but just how likely is this in principle? And what are the possible ways and means for the Russian Federation to deploy additional troops there? And of course, in your opinion, what would be the main goal? So, what do you think is the likelihood of this happening?
It's hard for me to imagine how they would do it, how they would transfer them there, purely from a technical and logistical standpoint. They could do it by air, but then the flight paths of the transport planes would have to go over Ukraine, and those planes would be shot down. So honestly, it's really hard for me to figure out how they could pull this off. The goal is clear, to put additional pressure on the Odessa region using these troops that could be stationed there. But as for how they could actually transfer them, I really can't say at this point.
I'm interested in your assessment of what we're seeing right now, specifically regarding the situation on the eastern flanks of this confrontation with the Russian Federation, particularly what's happening around Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka, right? And if we're talking about the possible, let's say, plans that the enemy is trying to carry out, considering this summer campaign, what are they aiming for right now? Obviously, just having the desire doesn't necessarily mean having the capability at the same time. But still, if we're talking about what the enemy might be planning to accomplish over the course of this summer.
Well, their goals and plans are clear. To create a buffer zone in the Sumy region. We can see that they're making advances there. And they'd also like to fully capture the Donetsk region. So, those are the kinds of plans they're setting. First of all, as you said, there's a big gap between plans and reality. That's why what's happening now in part of the Donetsk region, heavy fighting in the Pokrovsk direction, attempts to advance, to drive a wedge between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka, crossing the Pokrovsk-Bakhmut highway where it branches off and heads toward Kostiantynivka, moving in that direction and expanding this wedge. Toward Kostiantynivka from Toretsk. So, I already mentioned this wedge, but they're also constantly trying to advance on Toretsk. So, as I see it, they're going to try to get as close to Kostiantynivka as possible, start battles for the city, and, if possible, capture it. Whether they'll succeed or not, we'll see. We'll see how the situation develops. In my opinion, they won't succeed. But they wanted to take Kostiantynivka in order to open the way towards Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and Dreshkivka. They would also like to take Avdiivka now, so they can once again advance toward Kostiantynivka and try to bypass it from the east. In other words, right now they're forming the encirclement from the flank, the flanking encirclement, of both the Pokrovsk-Myrovrad agglomeration and Kostiantynivka.